we're sitting here with Jamie, who is a member of the cycling team, Team Novo Nordisk. Jamie, how are you?
I'm doing great. You?
I'm doing well, thank you. So you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at a little bit of a later age. Can you tell us a little bit about your diagnosis? What was happening? Were you feeling any symptoms at all?
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing is that I let a life insurance policy lapse. And when I went to reapply for a new life insurance policy, the lady came out and gave me sorry about that.
No worries.
The lady came out and checked my blood sugar, and she called me up a couple days later and said I needed to speak to my doctor. So I called him, and he said, "Funny, I was just about to call you." And we made an arrangement for me to get right over to his office immediately, where he checked my blood sugar and at that point gave me the diagnosis that I was a type 2 diabetic. And so I'm one of the few people that can say a life insurance policy sort of saved my life, or the lack of one.
Right.
And so that sort of started me down that path of type 2 diabetes.
So you've been very active your whole life. And I think that there's sometimes a bit of a misconception, especially around type 2 diabetes, that if you lead an unhealthy lifestyle or a sedentary lifestyle, you're sort of putting yourself at risk, especially for type 2 diabetes. But you've been a soccer player, you tried out for the New York Yankees, I mean, you've been very athletic. So how do you feel about this misconception, and was getting the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes surprising?
When I was diagnosed, I didn't have to make too many lifestyle changes because I was really eating healthy and I was active, and I was playing sports, I was coaching sports, so it wasn't a big lifestyle change for me, but it was sort of for my family because you know there was a lot of things that changed in our dynamic, you know, with just prepping foods a little bit differently and watching what we eat a little bit more. So that was a big change for us in that way. What I found mostly is that I was hesitant to do some things because I wasn't sure how my body was going to react to them. And as I got to know my diagnosis a little bit better and was able to treat it effectively, then it was easier for me to go back to that, you know, active lifestyle that I had.
Right. And in the very beginning, you know, did you and your family and your teammates think that this may have meant an end to your athletic career, or put it on hold or anything like that?
Yeah, you know, I think initially everybody has that sort of fear that your life is going to change, and I sort of had this thing for a while that, you know, Daddy can't do that, or Daddy can't have that. You know, my kids weren't young at that point in time, but they weren't, you know, they weren't mature either. So, you know, we had to make some changes along that way. I was afraid to some extent that I was not going to be active, and you know, I wasn't going to be able to do some things. I think the big thing that changed for me was, and at that time I was coaching as well, is it gave me a better insight to some of the troubles that my athletes were going through too, even if they weren't, you know, a person living with diabetes, they were still challenged in whatever way their physical issues were.
And so that leads me perfectly into my next question is, you know, in your role as an advocate, as a coach, how do you react and what do you say to people when they think that they need to put their athletic career on hold because of a health challenge or diabetes?
Right. Well, I think everybody's dealing with something. You know, in today's age, we've all got our one thing that troubles us in some way. And I think that when I spoke to my athletes at the college, I basically told them that, you know, this, don't take it as a defeat, take it as a challenge, and I take this on as a challenge. I mean, you know, living with diabetes has helped me in a lot of ways because I totally understand my body and how it functions a lot better than I did maybe before. And so I challenged, you know, people, you know, with diabetes to do the same thing.
Right. Do you think that maintaining an athletic career sort of helped you learn some coping mechanisms or maintenance mechanisms for living with diabetes?
Yes, I think that, you know, exercise and diabetes is really, has to go hand in hand.
Right.
If you're living a sedentary lifestyle, you really put yourself at greater risk. And I think that just getting out and walking, for some people, athletics isn't their thing. And I try to tell them, well, if athletics isn't your thing, then park the car farther away and walk longer to work. Walk the longer distance, or when you go to the mall, park farther away and walk farther and walk around the block, or challenge yourself to take a little bit of exercise on. And I think that to me, I think, is more important than maybe athletics in particular for some people.
Right, and that's certainly Phil Sutherland's message, is that exercising is probably one of the best treatments for diabetes.
Sure, I think that if you're managing your diabetes with however your healthcare provider's having you do, you and your healthcare provider, however that works for you, I think that enhancing that with exercise is only going to make that management a lot easier.
So after you were diagnosed, did you seek out fellow athletes who also have diabetes to help educate you on the condition, or how did you do your research and everything?
Yeah, I went online like a lot of people do, I guess, anymore. And I found Phil Sutherland from at that time Team Type 1, and reached out to him, and he reached back to me and asked me or challenged me to get involved with my local ADA, which I did. And I found out about the Tour de Cure event, and I did that ride the first year. Didn't know if I was going to be able to complete it. Got very emotional at the end of that ride because I didn't know. I challenged myself with 62.5 miles, and I said, well, let's try that, and made it through with the help of a couple of my friends. But what that did is that put me in connection with a lot of people that were living with diabetes, and I got to ride with them. I got to talk with them and work with them, and they worked with me on how they were managing their diabetes, and gave me some insight on how I could challenge mine.
Right. So we're just touching on Phil Sutherland and his mission with Team Novo Nordisk, and you've been on the team for 4 years. How did you get on the team, after being in touch with Phil?
Yeah, I had a couple of their riders actually came up and did the Buffalo Tour de Cure, and I got to meet with them, and we chatted, and they were really interested in my background and how I was coaching and some of my athletic abilities in the past, and they thought I'd be a good fit on the team because maybe I wasn't a cyclist per se, but more on the fact that I was a coach, and they thought that I could maybe help people that were trying to manage their diabetes better as a coach.
Right. So what does it mean to you to be on Team Novo Nordisk, and how has it changed your life at all?
Well, it's a privilege and an honor, obviously, to be on a team of that stature. It's a tremendous organization from top to bottom, and what it does is it's given me an opportunity to reach out to more and more people and talk with more and more people and be more exposed in the community with people that are trying to manage and live with their diabetes.
You've always been a very athletic person, as we've already talked about. So, I think kind of going from one sport to another maybe is not the most difficult thing. And you said earlier that for people who really aren't, into athletics or sports, just park the car a little bit further away. But for people who might be inspired to get into athletics or even potentially join Team Novo Nordisk, what sorts of inspirational messages or encouragement do you have for them?
Well, I have a story about a gentleman who was newly diagnosed with diabetes. This was a couple of years ago, and he was at a Tour de Cure event, and he was going to ride 10 miles. And I certainly can ride the bike more than 10 miles. And I chose that day to ride with him. And he struggled, didn't think he was going to make it. At the 5-mile mark, wanted to quit, and I told him no, I wasn't going to let him. And I literally had to push him the last couple of miles on the bike to get him to the finish line. And I remember as he was coming up the driveway at the school that was lined with people cheering him on, and when he finished and how emotional he was, with that event and how that changed him. I got to see him about 3 years later, and he had lost a ton of weight and was his diabetes was being managed a whole lot better than what it was when he was newly diagnosed. And he just wants to get involved himself. And I think that that's an inspiration for people like me that are on Team Novo Nordisk, that if we can touch one person that way, hopefully now in his community he's reaching out and touching a bunch of other people.
Yeah, that's so great. And so as one of my last question wrap up, do you have any sort of messages or words of encouragement for anyone who's newly diagnosed or thinking they're experiencing symptoms and just kind of feeling a little lost?
I think that when you're newly diagnosed, it's clearly a change. You're in for a big change in your life, and you're counting this and checking that and pricking this and all of that kind of fun stuff. And I think that to me, the task is just take it straight on, challenge it, and don't back down. Don't give up. Don't look the other way. Just don't try to pretend it's not there. Just go at it as hard as you can for as long as you can. And I think that when you do that, and you can see the strength in yourself then, and your resolve to beat this. And once you take that challenge on, you're not going to lose.
Right. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for taking the time with us today, and we wish you the best of luck with Team Novo Nordisk.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.